Creamer Media's Mining Weekly is talking to George Roach, the chairman and CEO of Premier African Minerals, which is listed on the AIM in London and which is currently building a mine in Zimbabwe, a mine for tungsten. George, can you tell us about why tungsten is attracting investors' attention at the moment?
Well, tungsten is attractive, and dealing with the supply side in particular, not a huge amount of substantial tungsten mining operations have historically existed. A lot of mining has been at a relatively small scale and almost of a semi-artisanal nature. The fundamentals for tungsten have indicated that there are likely to be shortages in supply, and that has made it attractive. Recently, the prices of tungsten, of wolframite, which is normally priced off discount to the ammonium paratungstate price, escalated quite significantly. They pulled back a little at the moment. We believe that this is pretty well a bottom in the price where we are. And looking at several others in the mining space and various other analysts, they seem to confirm that view. The operation in Zimbabwe that we have is of particular interest in that, firstly, it was historically mined. Secondly, it is of a particularly high grade. And thirdly, it is of ferberite nature. It is not a scheelite wolframite that we will be supplying.
Now I see there's also a tungsten mine going up in the UK. How does yours compare with that one?
To be absolutely honest with you, I'm being very candid with you, I do not necessarily look very closely at what is happening in the UK. Our market for wolframite is going to be different. It's going to be Europe, and it's going to be into the East. So I'm more focused on where we are and where our market is going to be. Our competitors that I tend to look at, or co-producers that I tend to look at, are new mines coming on stream in the UK, and also new mining operations proposed in Spain and Portugal. In terms of those, we compare very favorably, particularly some of the traditional and longer operating mines in Portugal. We have very similar mineralization, and we, as I said earlier, have particularly good grades. Our initial production will be through an open pit, and our diluted run of mine grade is going to be in excess of 1%. Now that compares very favorably to many other people. In addition to that, the historic mine at RHA has substantial underground development, which was left intact when the mine was abandoned during the Bush Wars in the late 70s. A lot of the work that had been done at that stage was done by Falcon Bridge. We have subsequently dewatered this mine and have been able to confirm the existence of historically reported, obviously non-compliant reserves underground, and the material is intact, hasn't been mined. We've recently channel sampled, and the assays that are coming back seem to indicate that the historic data we have is standing up very well. So over and above the existing resources that we have in measured, indicated and so on, we're expecting a fairly meaningful upgrade from the underground.
And when do you think your first ore will come out of your project that you've got in Zimbabwe?
Well, the first projected production, major commercial production, is anticipated for the beginning of June. The plant is under construction in Johannesburg. It's being built by Appropriate Process Technologies in Johannesburg. It's due for shipment from Johannesburg to Zimbabwe on the 11th of May. Civils are presently under construction at the site, and we are reasonably confident that we're going to meet that deadline of end of May and be producing commercially in June. On the lighter side of that, we have at site a couple of workers who've historically worked in low-grade artisanal tungsten, and they have found a James table at site, and have found that they're able to take shovelfuls of soil off the local roads and actually produce tungsten already. So if that gives comfort, not sure, but the techniques certainly work, and the mineralization is very clear.
And what is the investment that you've had to put into this, and how have you funded it?
The investment to date is running at, to end of December 2014, is running at about 9 million US that has gone into it. Premier is listed. We did raise some funds, but Premier African Minerals as a company was first incorporated about 7 or 8 years ago under a different name, and ran as a private entity, privately funded, until December 2012 when we listed. So there was a fair amount of work done previous to that. We had done a traditional or proper exploration in Zimbabwe. It's worth mentioning that in the Zimbabwe context, partly because of the nature of the way in which you acquire tenure through a claims block, that you're able to maintain ownership of that through work that is done, converted to money, converted to a money value or a development value, and or by paying money, that this didn't necessarily encourage large-scale traditional geological development of a project as we would normally expect. And very often a mine was developed simply following a mineralized quartz vein, for example. And a lot of that had happened at RHA extensively, both open pit and underground. Now, we went back and we drilled this. We've drilled it in 2 drill campaigns. We've used competent consultants to do the necessary resource work. We've been very careful in terms of our metallurgical study work that we've done. We, for example, ran a ton of material through network studies, used 200 kg to develop the actual process and flow sheet, and then used the remaining 800 kg as a pilot to actually pilot study this. So we're very comfortable with the resources, with the concentrates we're going to get, the grades, etc., etc.
And we see orders for big aircraft, and we think at the back of our head, oh, well, that will create some tungsten demand. But what is creating demand for tungsten?
Well, I think that's one of them, and if you read the media, that's a pretty good example. I think there was one the other day of every time as that Emirates buys an A380, there's a massive of tungsten. But I think that there are other uses that are beginning to develop beyond the traditional light bulb filaments, drilling machine tools, and so on and so forth. I think that adds to the demand side, which, as I said, is at the moment, I think the supply side is possibly more questionable necessarily than the development on the demand side.
And what is tungsten selling as at the moment, and what has been the historic high price?
At the moment, well, we sell a concentrate, a wolframite concentrate. It's a tungsten oxide, basically. And we sell based on the ammonium paratungstate price. Ammonium paratungstate's a chemical process that takes the concentrate and will eventually provide a tungsten carbide powder. And the pricing is based as a discount to that. Now, at the moment, the metric ton unit price, as I mentioned, is down to 260. Between, I think yesterday was 268 to 283 was the European price quoted. It was in that vicinity. The historic prices we've seen have been over 400. We've also seen some prices that are well below that. So are we at a low point or at a high point at the moment? We aren't at either. We really aren't at either. But I do think that we're bottoming out at a point that seems to be logical, based on what I perceive more to be supply side issues than necessarily on the demand side issues.
And on the community aspects in Zimbabwe, and you sort of what is in it for Zimbabwe, what do you have to do to make sure that you have a license to operate?
Well, going back several years ago, we'd been looking at this particular deposit, this RHA deposit, for probably 4 or 5 years now, and the decisions from the Zimbabwean government to push through the 51% indigenized ownership happened actually after our interest started in this project. I took a view that what I knew of the project at that time was good enough, and that there was sufficient historic development to leave me feeling quite happy to only have half of the project. So that eased the negotiation, the discussion. But having said that, the attitude that I had from the indigenization economic empowerment minister at the time, and from the board, has always been very cooperative. And we were able to reach an agreement that acknowledged that we were going to spend additional money on exploration and at risk. And we were able to agree a basis under which that would be recovered. And we were able to discuss premiums on that. We were also able to agree and it is set out in our shareholders agreement, that it is our local Zimbabwean company that is responsible for financing and building this mine. Neither of the shareholders, neither the Indigenization and Economic Empowerment Fund, nor Premier African Minerals through our subsidiary, have a direct responsibility to finance this. It is the local company. So on the basis that the local company and the Zimbabwean partner is unable to raise funds, the responsibility of financing this has come back to Premier African Minerals. But the principle is accepted that whatever the cost of that money is, and the cost of building this mine, is on a loan basis and is repayable at the end of the day to Premier African Minerals. Now, I sometimes don't think that that's appreciated fully. I don't think that the effect of that on Premier African Minerals is appreciated fully. It's not seen in our share price at all. In fact, where we are at the moment isn't seen in the share price either, but I think that we're in common with many others there. Yeah. So, I mean, I've found, just going back to the relationship side, I have just come back from a couple of days in Zimbabwe, and one of the remarkable things is that every government official, senior government official that we have met, is indicating they will do whatever it is reasonably within the framework of the laws that they have there to ensure that we get this into production, that it works, that we do not have any hindrances, etc., etc. And that includes visits from people representing the President's office, coming directly to the mine and saying, what do you need? What can we do for you? So I find that the environment is an extremely friendly one. I find the standards of education of the people that we are dealing with in Zimbabwe to be exemplary. I find the existing skills that are available to be absolutely acceptable. I find that the local contractors, and we are using a local contractor to do the civil construction and will be our mining contractor as well in the open pit, we are absolutely comfortable with what they're able to provide. When we dewatered the existing underground mine, we also had to re-equip internal winzers and various other things. We used a local shaft sinking company. They did an exceptional job at a very competitive price. So all of those, to me, I find to be extremely positive and supportive. The other comment that I perhaps should make is that this is located 20 kilometers south of Wangi, and it's an hour to the turnoff from Victoria Falls is just over an hour. Now that we've almost finished upgrading our road access to the mine, that's another 20 minutes. So you're only like an hour and 20 minutes from Vic Falls International Airport. It's a tarred road, it's good. The infrastructure is generally good. The main railway line that operates runs 4 kilometers. We have a siding 4 kilometers from where we are. We're able to ship our concentrates containerized by rail all the way to Durban or wherever we wish to send them. The rates are competitive we're offered. So there are all of these factors that exist as well. Perhaps the biggest risk to to man, as it were, in the development of the mine, is that we are almost bordering on the Wangi National Park. We border on the Decker Safari area, which is hunting, and so we have a plethora of elephant, buffalo, lion, whatever it is you want. So you can actually come to the mine and go on a game viewing trip as much as view a mine.
And will your product be subject to the 15% levy that is being introduced by the Zimbabwean government on exports?
No. The only levy, as it were, that we have to deal with at this stage is that the Minerals Marketing, MMCZ, the Minerals Marketing body, does require I think it's 2% plus 0.87% plus VAT. It's around about 3%. So that's the cost at this stage. Our final financing on the development of the mine, and some of it's not quite finally announced at this stage, but it's known what we need and where we are with this. Our final financing requires that the payment for our concentrates is actually paid external to Zimbabwe, and that the lenders have the ability to effect a cash sweep before funds are remitted back to Zimbabwe. And the indications are that the various bodies and so on in Zimbabwe who need to be involved in this will work with us and do whatever it is that they require to assist us in getting this done. And we're extremely transparent and open with them in everything that we do. And I think that is what leads to the cooperative approach that we have from the authorities there as well.
And just getting back to the physical part of the mine, what is the life of mine and what sort of depth are you going to go to?
Well, at this stage, the mine, the geology of the mine is that it's a series of what we refer to as lodes. And these are near vertical structures. There are at least 7, 8, maybe 10 of these separate lodes. The mineralization is clear. You can identify it very, very clearly. You identify it in trenches on the surface. It's clearly identified in drill core, and it's clearly identified in the underground workings as well. Now, the resource that we have established right now is approximately 2.7 million tons at 0.8 odd %. Now, that gives us the ability to construct an open pit mine initially, which will run for 22 months, and the revenue from the open pit will repay the debt that we are raising now to cover the cost of developing the open pit, and will allow us to develop the underground. Once that is done, so the open pit has a projected life of 22 months. The underground, based only on measured and indicated, is about 8 years. Based on total resources at the moment is closer to 15 years. But that resource that we are looking at is concerned only with lodes 1 and 2. We have not extended this exploration into the remaining lodes. And the underground mineralization that we are looking at is not on lodes 1 and 2. This is on other lodes. So we're pretty excited about the upside of this thing. So open at depth, open on strike in both directions. The deposit's in an outcrop, and it's quite a visible outcrop. It's pretty easy to get to. The development of it has been some historic open pit and then underground. The underground comprises a 130 meter shaft, which is from the top of the outcrop all the way down, dual compartment, concrete lined. It's not equipped, but the shaft exists. And 130 meters of shaft, a lot of digging and a lot of money to get there. Then we have adit access from both sides of the outcrop, approximately 60 meters above the lowest point in the mine. And where the adits join close to the main shaft, and also close to an internal shaft that has been developed. That internal shaft goes all the way down to the bottom. That has been re-equipped completely, series of steel ladders, platforms, and so on. So we have access for the channel sampling work and so on that we've done. There's kilometers of underground development. There's history of old stoping that's there. There's history of what hasn't been mined. In fact, it's an experienced walk into it and suddenly realize that this is a mine. This isn't an exploration anymore. This is a mine.
That was George Roach, the chairman and CEO of Premier African Metals, an AIM-listed company, talking to Creamer Media's Mining Weekly on a tungsten mine that he is developing in Zimbabwe.